I'm Lucy.
And I'm Jennifer.
You're listening to Everything I Know About.
Each week, we share everything we know about a new topic, equipped with some internet research and a little too much exposure to pop culture.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
Today, we are discussing the menstrual cycle. Hopefully, you'll learn something you did not know today. I certainly did as I was doing research, and this is actually a topic that I have been wanting to do for a while, and then a listener wrote in with a similar request, so very excited to cover this. So what initially sparked my interest was about 4 to 5 months ago, I started getting all of this content from women talking about their cycles. I was hearing these terms that I'd never heard of before, like the luteal phase and the follicular phase, how these phases actually impact your mood, your physical strength. Did you see any of these types of videos?
Oh, constantly. I feel like I have for years, but oddly enough, one of the things that made it pretty mainstream, at least in my feed, was when people were body shaming Taylor Swift during the Eras tour.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, she's incredibly fit. She's a
yeah.
hot lot. I mean, she's amazing. And people were body shaming her in her Reputation onesie because she looked like she had a little bit of a belly. And then all the comments were like, the luteal phase comes for us all. Like, Miss Girl's just on her period. And so I keep on seeing content like that. And then I feel like there's been more of a shift within the past year or two of people wanting to get off of hormonal birth control and going more natural. So then people are like obsessed with their cycle. What cycle am I in? Are we optimizing our exercise for the cycle and all of that? And I honestly, prior to doing this, have not really understood what the cycles are or what you're supposed to be doing in each of them. I know they exist. That's about it.
Yeah, I feel like the videos I was seeing initially were more content that women were making about the different phases and how one in particular comes to mind where I showed this to Avery because it was this woman who was like, okay, when you're in your follicular, your body is really fertile. So if you're in a relationship, you're kind of horny. But as soon as you move into the luteal phase, your body is pissed that your partner did not get you pregnant. So you just find everything they do so annoying. And I was like, is this true? Because this would explain a lot. I definitely feel like there are weeks where I just find Avery extremely annoying, and it's really not to do with him. It's definitely me and my mood swings. Like, I was seeing those types of videos a lot. But then lately, it's actually shifted. Now I see men making videos about taking care of their girlfriends on their period and like cooking them like butter basted steak and all this stuff. And that's the stuff that's going viral. Men are talking about it now too, which is super interesting.
Yeah, I find it quite attractive when a man has sympathy and empathy for you and wants to do shit for you. Because I'm like, you should. Frankly, it should be standard that you get some grace during certain phases. Probably all the time would be best, but at least during certain phases.
Yeah.
And yeah, do cook me a steak and get me chocolate when I'm on my period.
I guess in my life, I always thought, okay, sure, I get like a week of grace a month. But now I'm realizing, no, it's 24/7. There's shit going on.
It's 24/7.
It's 24/7. And then I think I was either talking to you or one of your friends when I came to Nashville to visit.
Oh, this was me.
I was talking to you and telling you about all the new learnings I was getting. But you were like, aren't you on hormonal birth control? And I'm like, yeah, I've been on hormonal birth control since high school. And you were like, okay, then you're not even ovulating. Like, the cycle does not apply to you. And I was like, what the hell? I did not know that. I literally thought I was still getting my period every month, which now that I've done research, I'm like, that was incredibly ignorant of me. I knew obviously that I couldn't get pregnant on the pill, but for some reason, every month I still was bleeding. So I was like, oh, that's just a period.
Yeah. It's one of those things that once you know, it's like, oh, obviously you don't have it. But I didn't even put two and two together until I wear a Whoop strap. And they came out with this new feature like 2 or 3 years ago where it does your cycle tracking for you and it adjusts how much strain you're supposed to have a day based on your cycle. When I was setting up my profile with it, one of the questions was, are you on hormonal birth control? And at the time I had the Mirena IUD. So I said yes. And they're like, sorry, you can't use this feature. You're on hormones. And I was like, what?
Oh.
I had like a little explainer and it was like, you don't actually have the same monthly hormonal cycle as somebody who's not on hormonal birth control. And I was like, holy fuck, that's a problem. And then I started doing more digging and I hated that fact so much that I got the copper IUD and have been on it. We'll get into it during my section, but there's one reason in particular why I really don't think, unless you have a medical reason to be on hormonal birth control, I don't think any woman should be, personally.
Okay, we'll see. I'm on it still. So we'll see. Oh, God. Well, that makes me feel better that you didn't realize that until you were an adult.
Yeah, I didn't.
I was like, holy shit, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Because like you still bleed and like After you told me that, I looked it up. And okay, so the bleeding that you get when you're on the pill is not a period. It's technically called withdrawal bleeding,
Mm-hmm.
which is referring to the withdrawal of hormones in your pill.
Yeah.
So it is still like your uterus shedding its lining, which is what makes your actual period, but you didn't have an egg released.
Yeah.
Fascinating. This came up so much on my trip to Nashville when I came to visit you. But in addition to us having that conversation, your friend, we were like out at a bar, and I don't know how this came up, but we were talking about fertility and just if we're going to have kids soon, because we're like all in our 30s. And she was like, oh, but since you've been on birth control, you have a lot more eggs than like women who aren't on birth control. And at first in my brain, I was like, that can't be true. But then when you debunked my understanding, I was like, oh shit, then I'm probably wrong about that too. She was probably right. I probably do have way more eggs. And so I looked that up right before this episode, and that is actually not true. It's not true
It's
that you have
not
more
true.
eggs.
Okay.
Yeah. It's confusing, right? Like all these different things.
Yeah. Why is it not true?
When you're born, you have all of the follicles you're ever going to have, and follicles are the precursor to eggs. So
Mm-hmm.
1 to 2 million eggs already in our body. And every period that you have, hundreds of thousands of these follicles are activated, and then one becomes mature and it becomes an egg. The rest are basically broken down along the way. And that's a process called atresia. If you're taking the pill, you stop the mature egg from developing, but it doesn't stop the waves of atresia. So your follicles are still breaking down as you age, as you have more and more cycles. By being on the pill, you're not like saving your eggs or delaying menopause.
Oh, interesting. You lose your eggs through aging.
Yes.
That honestly makes a lot more sense because that's why they tell you to harvest your eggs in your 20s. I hate the term egg. I feel like we're hens. It's so weird.
We are just little animals. We're just little animals at the end of the day.
So weird. I have a funny story. No one's allowed to judge me though, because it's kind of like TMI. When I first started getting my period, I had a pad on and I heard that you lose like a tablespoon of blood a day or something. And when I went to change it, I was like, there's no way there's a tablespoon in here. There's like at least a cup. There's so much blood. So I tried to like squeeze it out so I could measure it. And then when I squeezed it out, all of these little tiny circles came out of the pad. And I was like, oh my God, I just lost all my eggs.
Oh.
I had my period. It's not just one egg that came out in this period. All of them came out. Something genetically wrong happened and it just released all of my 2 million eggs just now. I was freaking out. And so I called my best friend. Mind you, we're 11. And she's like, Jennifer, you're such a moron. Those are the absorbent beads of your pad. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. It was like the little gel absorbers. I thought it was all my eggs.
Oh, funny.
I don't know how we transitioned from that. I'm sorry. That was a complete non sequitur.
It's okay. Yeah. All right. So I think to start, when I did research for this episode, I realized that there's actually 4 phases that your body goes through. So the first is the menses phase. This is the actual days of your period. So it's 3 to 5 days. And it happens in conjunction with your follicular phase. So your follicular phase begins the first day of your period and ends.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It overlaps. Yeah. So your follicular phase ends at ovulation. Everyone's cycle is, of course, different, but this can range anywhere between 14 to 21 days, and it can change as you get older. So this is your like fertile window, and as you get older, it can actually shrink as you become less fertile.
Mm.
The hormones that are impacting this are really estrogen. So estrogen is what causes the lining of your uterus to thicken, and it's thickening so that when you produce an egg, if it gets fertilized by sperm, the egg has a nice cushy bed to implant into so you can become pregnant. The other hormone playing a role in this phase is called FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone, and this is what sends the signal to your follicles to grow. One follicle is going to become dominant and form a fully mature egg. Ovulation is just one moment in time. It occurs around day 14 of your cycle, and right after ovulation, your luteal phase starts. Your egg is at this point traveling through your fallopian tubes, hoping to meet a little spermie and attach to your uterus. During this period, progesterone is rising. If the egg becomes fertilized and attaches itself to your uterine wall, you become pregnant. If that doesn't occur, then the estrogen and progesterone will both drop, and that is what causes the lining of your uterus to shed, and it triggers the period.
So you're fertile during the follicular phase, not the luteal?
Yes.
So you're fertile on your period?
Your fertility window is 5 days before ovulation and 1 day after ovulation.
Okay.
So
Oh, it's not really that much.
you're fertile basically at the later end of your follicular phase.
Okay.
When estrogen is really high in your body, it makes you feel more confident and you also have a higher libido. Your body is trying to encourage you to get out there and have sex so that you'll procreate. You have all of the energy and feel good hormones to help you on that journey. And as we know, hormones regulate so many things in our body, including protein metabolism and the ability for our muscles to recover. So it actually impacts not just like how you feel and your confidence, but your like physical body in terms of your muscles. It can impact how you train at the gym. So in our follicular phase, our muscle strength and anaerobic capacity is the highest in the late follicular phase. If you're doing resistance training, you can actually build more muscle in this phase than if you did the same training in the luteal phase.
So we should strength train and then do more of low impact stuff during your luteal, it sounds like.
Yes, exactly. During your period, take it easy, rest. Afterwards, you should expect a burst of energy for the next 1 or 2 weeks. Take advantage. Like, live your life, go out, have fun, do all the things that you want to do, and then be a little easier on yourself once you hit your luteal phase because you're not going to feel as good. This is when PMS symptoms start to occur. So, the symptoms of the luteal phase are exactly the symptoms of PMS. So, you are expected to feel bloating, like it's not just in your head. Your body will actually retain more water. And it does actually have real impacts on your mood. So, anxiety, stress, and binge eating are elevated more generally throughout the luteal phase. And then I found a study that showed that for the days immediately prior to your period and on your period, there's actually increases in psychosis, mania, depression, alcohol use if you struggle with these things normally.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's intense.
it's intense. Estrogen actually downregulates dopamine transmission, which mimics the action of many antipsychotic medications.
Hmm.
So then when you're coming off of the luteal phase and estrogen is reducing in your body, you don't have some of that same benefit, which is why these symptoms are stronger.
Crazy.
Crazy that it can be that strong that it's like mimicking an active ingredient in medication.
Yeah.
And then in the luteal phase, you have all that progesterone in your body, right? And in the presence of stress, progesterone is converted into cortisol, which is what regulates
Oh,
our stress response.
yeah.
So it can actually impair your emotional processing, which maybe translates into you feeling or other people in your life saying that you're moody. Okay, so now that we know this, what can you actually do to take care of your body? There's this concept called cycle syncing. This is what I've seen a lot of the TikTok videos about, the guy making the steak for his girlfriend. It's following this idea, and it was actually originated from this nutritionist, Elisa Vitti's 2014 book called Woman Code. It's not actually been researched in a clinical setting. So you can take this with a grain of salt. But of course, there is a lot of clinical research, like what I just described, about actual differences in your mood and your activity due to your hormones. So on your period, you are supposed to eat iron-rich foods to replace the iron that you're losing from bleeding. And that includes your classic steak, green leafy vegetables, lentils, beans. You should try to consume a lot of vitamin C and vitamin K, and omega-3 fatty acids can actually reduce inflammation and cramping.
Sounds like a surf and turf situation.
Yeah. Do you do anything special on your period, like when you're feeling bad?
I am anemic, so I do eat a steak.
Nice.
Yeah, I do. I like always just buy myself a really expensive filet mignon and cook it at home. And I'm like, it's medically necessary. I don't feel bad about this. I'm dying that cycle syncing is the term for doing special things during the times of your cycle, because when I saw that you were researching cycle syncing, I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah, me and my besties do have our period at the same time. We're all synced up. I thought you were
Oh,
doing why women sync up.
I looked at that too.
Oh, you did? Okay, fabulous.
Yeah.
The covens on their cycle.
I know. Actually, there's a very interesting answer to that question. So, but we'll get to that in a
Ooh.
second. Okay, so your follicular and ovulation stage, what should you be eating? You're supposed to eat foods that balance estrogen. So, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and kale, fermented foods like sauerkraut, kombucha, kimchi, a lot of healthy fats, and leafy greens. I mean, honestly, leafy greens is in every single one of these categories. I'm like, they just really
Yeah.
want you to be eating your salads. Your luteal phase, I found this the most interesting because, like, I certainly experienced cravings, and it was interesting because they actually said if you eat a lot of complex carbs and high fiber foods, that can curb cravings. So, cruciferous veggies, sweet potatoes, it'll just make you feel fuller for longer, so you'll maybe want that chocolate cookie less. Magnesium-rich foods can actually reduce bloating. So, pumpkin seeds.
I had heard that the reason that we crave chocolate in particular during your period is because of the magnesium.
Oh,
A dark chocolate
yeah.
has magnesium.
More justification for eating chocolate.
Love it.
And then drinking lots of water and reducing caffeine, ideally, during the luteal phase. Okay, so do women's cycles sync? I couldn't really find a straight answer, so there's like a lot of conflicting information about this. And interestingly, people who study this also study whether the moon affects your cycle. So this is right up your alley.
Love it. I'm so excited.
I would say like the most straightforward scientific conclusion on this is that this is a myth. There was an article published by the Cleveland Clinic in January 2022 that talked a little bit about the history of this, which I think is really interesting. So this originated from a 1971 study published in Nature calling this phenomenon the McClintock effect. This study was based on observations of 135 Wellesley College students. Later, there were many, many other studies who tried to duplicate the McClintock effect, and they couldn't. So the conclusion then became, oh, there were like errors with this study, both methodological errors as well as statistical errors. A lot of other studies essentially like debunked this original study. And this Cleveland Clinic article referenced one in particular, a 2006 study that looked at Chinese college students living in dorms together and found that even after a year of living together, there was no evidence for cycle syncing. So what's really happening here? The conclusion of this article was like science says there's no chemical or hormonal reason to explain why your period would match up with someone that you're closely interacting with, like a roommate or a close friend. But there is a mathematical explanation. So it's as simple as obviously over time, if you're on like a 4-week cycle and your friend's on a 5-week cycle, you're going to have some overlap at some point. That's what this article was saying. Like women who are like can point to times in their life where they've experienced this, they're saying it was bound to happen. It's just like a matter of math.
Please.
You're rolling your eyes.
The medical gaslighting of women is infuriating to me. They'll be like, oh, you all experience the same thing. It's not real. What you're experiencing is not real. Mathematically, it's going to happen at some point. And you're like, yeah, but like, it's not mathematically going to happen for like 9 months out of the year, right? I'm like, no, but that's not what you experience. Yes, it is. Yes, it fucking is. So, no, I'm not saying like, oh, one time me and my friend were on our period during the same time. That's not what women are talking about. No. For like very extended periods of time, their periods happen at the same time. Sorry, I get fired up about this because when I was doing research on what hormonal birth control does to women, like every woman will tell you like the same symptoms about like their periods, about birth control. And then the entire medical industry will be like, that's not real. And so like this is just, can you tell I'm fired up about this? This just like points to that. This points to that to me. But I get it. Yeah, of course. No shit. Everybody's cycles are a little different. So like they're bound to sync up at some point. Thank you, men who did this study. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, like there's been so many studies done on this and like they find different things kind of every single time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, like 2022, that's fairly recent. And then I came across a study that was published in 2023 looking at like female medical students. It was 62 participants, and they did find a statistically significant synchronization. And then their critique was of those, like they even pointed to that same 2006 study done on the Chinese college students and were like, that study had issues. So I feel like everyone is just kind of pointing their fingers at each other. I mean, I think the reality is to truly run a perfect study, you'd have to have like none of these women that you were studying were on birth control. Mm-hmm. There's so many other factors. Like we know, for example, that if you exercise too much, it can cause you to skip your period. If you're under a lot of stress, it can cause you to skip your period. So there's like just so many confounding factors for us to run like a really, really clean study, which is, I think, why you have so many studies over time finding different results.
Yeah. And also it could be as simple or as complicated, depending on how you look at it, is like if the study is just doing, do these women who live in the same dorm building, do they cycle sync? And the answer would be no. And it's maybe like, oh, maybe just not by virtue of being in the same square footage as another woman, you start cycle syncing with them, but because you're like very good friends. So you eat at the same times and you're eating similar foods and maybe you're working out together and maybe you're walking at the same time. Like that kind of lifestyle stuff that you're doing together makes your cycle sync. Not like, oh, the person that lives 3 doors down from me and I are going to start cycle syncing just because we're like next to each other. You don't think that's how it
Yeah.
probably works. So these
Yeah.
studies are kind of ridiculous for doing it that
I mean,
way.
they were roommates, but you know, not like
I mean,
3 doors down. But I hear you. I hear the point still, for sure.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure most of us have lived with roommates at one point. If you're not friends with your roommate and just like live in the same, you know, you're sharing a bathroom, it doesn't necessarily mean your cycles are going to sync.
It's like a side of womanhood friendship for a reason.
Oh, yeah. In terms of the moon question, I found a study that was like looking at the moon because I guess this happens in animals. So obviously humans are just animals, right? Animals who their fertility is like affected by the moon. I wasn't able to find a study that found any actual connection between the moon and us as humans, but I mean the fact that it happens in animals, I don't know, maybe it could have an impact on us. The other potential theory I saw about this was pheromones. The conclusion on this I thought was pretty funny, which is just like in our human society today, like most people take a shower quite often. And like even if it was pheromones, you'd be washing those pheromones off your body. It's not like your armpits and your groin, which are like the pheromone heavy places, are like being picked up by all the women around you.
Sad, but funny. There's like this group of women on TikTok that are trying to convince you to name your cycles after the moon phases. So like your menses is like your full moon phase. The luteal is like the waning crescent.
I mean, that helps you understand it. It's easier to say. Dude, I've been saying follicular so many times and like tripping over the word.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, to your point about like it depends so much on what source you looked at. Another question I had, and I just was Googling, was like, I'd always heard that when you're on hormonal birth control, essentially your body is being tricked into thinking that you're pregnant. So I Googled that because I was like, is that real? Like, why have I just always believed that? And then I came across this article that was like, it's probably more accurate to say that you're in menopause than you are pregnant. And that freaked me out. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, I don't like that.
Wait, what?
I don't like that at all.
And I was like, okay, the name of the website was some sort of family planning thing. So I was like, what is this? And then I looked at some of their other publications and it was like a religious text about, you know, your fertility as a woman. So then I was like, okay, they're just anti-birth control. So that's why they're like positioning in this way that feels like a little less palatable, you know?
Yeah. Everyone has an agenda with
Totally
this kind of stuff. And that's why I find it very difficult, like doing research for this brought up old wounds, as you can tell by my reactivity, because I've done so much research over the course of my life, talked to so many gynecologists, so many doctors about symptoms that I would have related to my hormones and the birth control methods I was on, and like felt like I wasn't being heard or understood at any turn. And now, decades later, I can kind of look back and see that everyone just had an agenda and wasn't actually listening to me. So, for example, I think a lot of well-meaning gynecologists don't want there to be this negative connotation with birth control because it is so important to be in control of your reproductive system, to like have a good life as a woman, to be able to go to college, like all of this stuff. And so it's sort of a political stance that I 100% agree with. I think everyone should have access to birth control, to abortion, to healthcare for their reproductive system. That being said, I don't think that's the same thing as saying birth control is 100% side effect free. You will have no problems with it. There's no issues. And like this convoluted belief that in talking about the problems with taking the pill, you are somehow blasphemizing the pill in a way that could be like destructive to its accessibility. So I say that to say that like you talk to gynecologists and you'll maybe say, like in my case, you know, I'm gaining a lot of weight. I have a ton of acne. I'm depressed because I'm taking the pill. And then be like, well, those aren't real symptoms. Like, are you getting enough sleep?
interesting.
Like, they totally gaslight the fuck out of you. And I think they're doing it because they want everyone to have access to the pill and like not be afraid of taking it, which I understand that's a very noble goal. But at the same time, let's be honest about what it means to take the pill. It completely changes your physiology and your hormonal makeup. Of course, it's going to have different effects on different people. Like you seem to have had pretty minimal side effects from taking the pill.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you've been on it forever. So
yeah, well, it's an interesting experience because like I'd been prescribed a birth control pill. I can't even remember which one it was. And I was on it for like 10 years, I guess, when I was younger. And then I recently, in the last year, switched actually. But I switched because I was getting like adult acne, but it was definitely hormonal. It would happen the week before my withdrawal bleeding. I hate, by the way, that I can no longer refer to it as a period. Yeah. But I told my gynecologist and she was like, oh, let's switch your pill. Now I'm on a new type of pill because all of them have different mixtures of the hormones. And
Yeah.
my hormonal acne totally went away.
Oh,
So
that's great.
it was great
Yeah.
for me. Yeah. But I've
Yeah.
definitely heard the like weight increase thing. Like I know even the specific pill, I'm on like a Yaz generic, which
Hmm.
Yaz, I think they even had a lawsuit a while ago because it can cause blood clots. I mean, all birth control
Yeah.
can cause blood clots, but like I think that one in particular had some ill effects. And I was reading before I decided to switch women who were reporting all sorts of stuff like weight increasing, libido decreasing, all of these like negative side effects. And I think it just so depends on your body. Because like
Yeah.
for me, I haven't experienced any of that. I've only gotten the positives, but I 100% believe the women who are saying they experience negative things.
Yeah. It's completely dependent on like your biology. And I've gone on so many different types of pills because none of them were working for me, but I consistently had really, really bad side effects. Like one of the worst for me was horrible anxiety, depression. Like I would just like cry randomly every day when I was on it. I was so moody.
Mm.
And within 3 months of ever getting on the pill, I would have to get off of it because it was just, it completely ruined my life every single time. And when I would talk to the gynos about it, they would just like totally dismiss me. So the only type of hormonal birth control that ever worked for me was the IUD. That was a
Hmm.
godsend. I couldn't even do Mirena though. So there's two types of IUDs. There's one that has a little bit more hormones in it, and it's Mirena. It lasts 5 to 7 years. And then Kyleena and Skyla are smaller and they last 3 to 5 years. So I did the bigger one on recommendation of my gyno, who told me, don't worry, since it's an IUD, you won't have any of the symptoms that you got with the pill. And I told her how sensitive I am to hormones. Lo and behold, I get the big one and I have all the symptoms again. So I have to get it taken out and put the smaller one in. And the smaller
Ugh.
one didn't give me any symptoms. It was amazing. So that being said, it's not like it's totally hopeless if you want to figure out something that works for you. But I don't know. I've had friends that have had bad experiences with the pill, but have a great experience with like the arm injection, which is
Hmm.
more hormones than the pill. So it's just like, it totally is a trial and error thing.
Yeah. I feel like this is a perfect transition into what you looked into.
Yeah, so hormonal birth control. So I looked into how do hormones affect your cycle if you are on hormonal birth control, and what, if any, are the side effects of being on it for a prolonged period of time, like decades, years, and what are some things that you should look out for if you are on hormonal birth control. So, as we've already kind of talked about, Lucy, you did a good job explaining to us that you don't get a normal period when you're
Yeah.
on the birth control pill. So we know that.
Cry.
We know you're not getting your menstrual cycles, you're not ovulating. So how does hormonal birth control affect your cycle? You don't get it. So you're on like a completely different hormonal path. Is this actually a problem for you though? Like, is it a bad thing to not ovulate for a long period of time, to not have these hormonal cycles? Literally, my note says no evidence, parentheses, of course, dot, dot, dot. Because every medical journal, every gynecological journal is like, absolutely not. Birth control is 100% safe and there are no side effects and you don't have to worry about it. So I'm like, yeah, of course they're going to fucking say that. But that being said, I don't know. I would assume that taking synthetic hormones for 2 decades probably does something to your body. No one's going to tell us what it is, though. But here are some positives of taking synthetic estrogen for a long period of time. You probably have a decreased likelihood of certain cancers, including uterine cancer. So, if you have a history of uterine cancer, you might actually be encouraged to take hormonal
Hmm.
birth control. If you have like a predisposition towards pelvic inflammatory disease, there are certain birth controls that can help decrease that. And in decreasing pelvic inflammatory disease, you're actually increasing fertility. So this could be a positive side effect of that. The negative long-term side effects of birth control that I was actually able to find, this is only even 50% of the medical journals will admit to this, but they do say that it has been linked to blood clots, higher risk of heart attack and stroke, higher levels of cervical cancers and breast cancers from the synthetic estrogen specifically. That being said, there are types of hormonal birth controls that have different levels of progesterone and estrogen. So if you have like the progesterone heavy types, you're less likely to get these cancers. One very negative effect is lowered libido across the board. Lots of women report having much lower libido on birth control, and it thankfully does come back once you get off of it. As far as like taking it for 1 year versus 10 years, are you having issues with that? There isn't really good information on that. And Again, I don't know if that's like an agenda thing as I would probably think it is, but I also think it's probably more likely that there's just not a lot of money going to women's health studies,
Mhm.
unfortunately. And we know that that's a huge, huge problem. So how many people have actually like gone through the effort of following women over the course of 20 years who are taking birth control
Yeah.
and doing a study? Probably not many. I'm sure we're going to have plenty of studies on like that atom birth control for men that just came out.
What is this?
It's where they like, I don't know, like shoot some silicone in their dick so they can't jizz.
What? That could not be right.
Oh, I'm dead serious. They like plug up the hole.
Where does it go then?
It's just like the sperm. It's not like all of the
Oh,
ejaculation.
okay.
It's just like the sperm itself, like whatever can't escape. It's like the first male birth control, but they have to
Interesting.
like literally inject it. It's a shot and it's already been approved for anesthesia. And they're like, women get IUDs all the time and it is not approved for anesthesia. So that was like the big
Uh,
controversy with it.
Dang. I mean, I always hear, oh, like there's going to be a male birth control that like hits the market and then it won't just be on women. But I feel like it's going to be so niche still, though, you know?
It's gonna be
Like
no
what
man's gonna
man
do
is going to
that.
want to do that? Yeah.
Yeah. No, only a man who's
Annoying.
like terrified of paying child support or something, but no man is gonna do it for, taking some burden off of his girl. That's for sure. But yeah, the reason that that hasn't come out is because they're doing so many studies on it and they like want to make sure it's really safe and there's no side effects, God forbid.
Yeah, I mean, look, I, as a person who, what? Okay, it's not like I've never taken breaks. I would say probably got on birth control when I was like 18, and now I'm 31. So I do not want to hear that it would be bad for me, girl. Like, what am I supposed to do? There's nothing I can do to change that, you know?
It sounds like it's fine. Here's what my personal take is. I don't think there's a huge problem because so many women have done it and gone through it and women are
Yeah.
fine. Anecdotally, it seems like we have a higher level of female part cancers, like cervical, uterine, breast cancer. It does, and these journals are saying too, it does seem likely that synthetic hormones have something to do with that. That would not shock me. That sounds intuitively true. That being said, the thing that I'm about to describe to you is actually the thing that I think is a really huge problem for women taking hormonal birth control, but you're married, so it's fine. And you love your
Um,
husband, so it's fine.
okay. Like what, STDs? Is that what you're gonna bring up?
Mate selection.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hormonal birth control changes your psychology and makes you choose different mates than you would off of birth control.
Huh.
I'm going to get into the
Okay.
studies. I'm going to get into the
Okay.
science, but this is a fact. It is also a fact that women who choose their partner while they're on birth control and then get off birth control to have a baby are far more likely to get divorced and be sexually unattracted to their partner.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that is actually the real risk of being on birth control, frankly.
Wait, okay, so explain this to me though, because like obviously, as we just learned, if you're having your normal hormones, there's times in the month where you feel a little more horny, your like libido is higher. So that therefore you're like, I'm sure your attraction to someone who can get you pregnant is also higher. If you're
Hmm.
on the pill though, since a lot of the side effects that women are reporting are like dampen libido, wouldn't you just be like less attracted to men or
Actually, you're kind of like hitting the nail on the head a little bit.
okay.
Let's go through it. There's two different mechanisms for this. The first one is a little more, it's like less sexy to talk about, but we need to talk about it. So there is this gene called the major histocompatibility complex gene. That's what tells you how genetically different you are from somebody else. And
Mm,
we can actually smell that on somebody. So it's like you're attracted to somebody's smell. And usually that means you have very different genes from them. It's coming from these MHC genes. It also tells us that like we're not related to somebody and all of that. Women who are on the pill, they have been able to study and confirm that they are more likely to be attracted to somebody with similar MHC genes rather than
interesting.
dissimilar. One theory is that since the pill mimics pregnancy, that you're more drawn towards nurturing relatives than you are to like going out and trying to get pregnant by somebody.
Okay. But as we just learned, it's not mimicking pregnancy, it's mimicking menopause.
Hey, take it up with Scientific American. That's what they're saying, not me.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay. Yeah, I'm not worried about that since Avery's a white man and I'm an Asian woman. So
I
I
knew
think
you
we're
were
good
going to
on that
say that.
front.
I was like anticipating that comment. Okay. So that's like one side of it. So, okay, a study published in Psychological Science found that women paired with MHC similar men that they were paired with during birth control are less sexually satisfied and more likely to cheat on their partner than women paired with MHC dissimilar men. So, if a woman goes off birth control, she may not be attracted to her partner anymore.
Mm, okay. Because then the little pheromones that you were mistakenly getting attracted to, like that goes away. So then.
Yeah, you actually get disgusted by your partner because they're similar to you, and you're like,
Similar
oh,
to you.
yeah.
But then women are attracted to like they always like look for a man who's similar to their dads. That's a thing.
Maybe if they're on the pill, I don't know. Maybe that's where that's coming from. All right. So the second way that this manifests is estrogen increases a woman's preference for men whose faces, voices, and behaviors exhibit cues of testosterone.
Okay. Makes sense that estrogen would do that. Yeah.
Exactly. Estrogen makes us more attracted to manly men.
Hmm.
So think like square jaws, swagger, deep voice. Like the girly girl loves that. Makes sense. When on birth control, estrogen is kept very low. So women on hormonal birth control tend to choose more feminine men. So men with higher voices, men who have more feminized facial features and slim faces. They don't have square jaws, maybe a bit more slender in build rather than bulky, that kind of thing. So this very interesting study was done. This was like the most fascinating study I'd ever read. There was a group of women that were asked to sit in front of this computer program and manipulate pictures of men to make them their ideal romantic partner. They could either like masculinize or feminize facial features. Half of the group was then put on birth control, hormonal. The other group was not. They came back 3 months later and did the exact same exercise again. The group that was not on birth control didn't change anything. The group that was feminized their men. And this played out in real life. So actually, the way that they did this study was very funny because they had to use whatever markers they were using in the computer program to determine if somebody was feminine. But like the other half of it was just like the researchers judging if the dude was kind of feminine looking or not. Like they said it was like perceptional judgment was part of the criteria, which is very funny. The women on birth control came in with their partners and they had to judge if they were feminine or not. And they were like, yeah, these are like feminine men that they're choosing.
The researchers were judging.
Yes. The researchers, well, that's what I'm saying. Part of the criteria is
So
perceptual
funny.
judgment. The researchers decided that plus like whatever they were using in the computer program to determine if it was feminine features. So it's not just theoretical, it like plays out in real life. So what ends up happening
Damn, all
is
these short kings are about to be like, how can I get more ladies on birth control?
no, I was thinking about, I'm like, this is Timothy Chalamet. This is like Rat Boy Summer, all of that shit. This is why.
It's so funny.
Okay, so this is really sad, though. Really sad that when these women who choose their partners and they're in love with them and they get married, they get off birth control to have a baby, and they're so likely to find their partners not sexually attractive. They have less sexual arousal.
How do they know it's because they're not as attracted to their partners versus like the pressure of trying to make a baby, which we all know is can be hard, and like making sex into something that you schedule, like when you're ovulating and all that, is obviously less sexy than if you're doing it just for kicks.
I'm sure that's a component for some people. This didn't specify that it was like they leave their partners when they're trying to make a baby.
Oh, when they're just like off birth control.
Yeah.
Okay, in my brain, I'm like, the only reason you'd get off is to make a baby, but I guess women make choices for all sorts of reasons.
No, that is why they get off, but it's like over the course of their relationship, they're more likely to get divorced, not just like
I
during
see.
the phase of having the baby.
Got it. Okay, over the long term of their marriage.
Yeah, exactly. And what's kind of sad about this is the women report actually feeling their libidos increase because they got off of birth control. They're just like, oh, I want to have sex, just not with you.
Sad.
So anyway, that frankly is part of the reason I went on a copper IUD because I'm like, I don't want to choose my partner when I'm chemically imbalanced.
Damn, I can't believe this isn't wider known. How many women were in this study?
2,700.
Okay, so a huge study too.
Yeah. Well, there was like two different studies inside of this study. So the one where they had them like sitting in front of the computer programs, that was only like 50 women. They didn't have
Okay.
a lot of people doing that one. But when they studied like the long-term effects of getting off, that was thousands of women in that study.
Interesting. Yeah, I was like, there's no way they brought thousands of women in for these scientific researchers to judge if their man was feminine.
No,
What a
that was
funny
50.
job. This is like when you talked about the olive oil police force tasting the olive oil and deeming it quality or not. This is like the scientists being like, hot or not on your husband.
Okay, so to wrap this all up, if you want to choose your man not on synthetic hormones, one method that a lot of people are turning to is either the copper IUD, I'm a personal fan of it, or cycle tracking. So this is the non-hormonal birth control method that's gotten pretty popular with the Aura Ring and natural cycles pairing that's happening. I had always heard that this was very ineffective. And so I was really surprised to do some actual research and find that it's quite effective, surprisingly. So we're going to go into like why it's reported to be ineffective and what makes it ineffective versus effective. So just to like baseline here, as you laid out for us, you're only fertile during certain points in your cycle. So the theory here is if you can track your cycle well enough, you know exactly which days you're fertile and which ones you're not, and then you can like plan intercourse accordingly. This is called the rhythm method. It's very highly popularized by like the church and other religious institutions that don't want you to take birth control. So I was always like, this is propaganda. This is not real. It
Yeah.
is real. It's scientifically proven to be real. All of the places that really don't want you to get pregnant, like Planned Parenthood, are like, it's so ineffective. Please don't do it. And I totally get why they don't want you to do it. It's because it relies so much on you being consistent with actually tracking your period.
Hmm.
Also, your cycle changes like every single month, and a lot of people have irregular periods. So if you are somebody who is irregular, even by a few days, this is not a good method for you.
Yeah.
So that's most people, though.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. However, with modern medicine, we can now track your basal body temperature, and your basal body temperature tells you if you're about to ovulate. Your temperature increases slightly during ovulation. So, based on your temperature, we can tell exactly precisely which part of your cycle that you're in. And that's how Aura Ring, who's taking your temperature at night, is passing it to Natural Cycles, the app, which is telling you if you're fertile or not that day. So, this is 93% accurate compared
Okay.
to 75 just by like tracking the days.
What are condoms? Aren't condoms only like 90?
Condoms are also 93.
Okay. So in the same league.
Yep.
Pretty
And
good. Much higher than I would have expected. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. So I was a little bit skeptical though, because this was on the Natural Cycles website that they're like 93% effective. So I was like, okay, let's go verify and confirm elsewhere. And on like NIH, all these other websites that are independent were also claiming 90 to 99% efficacy. So again, 90 to 99% effective if you're using basal body temperature, and then 75% if you're just tracking your days.
When I was doing research on the cycles, I saw that like between follicular and luteal, there's like a slight difference in your basal body temperature, but it was so slight. What I saw was like zero point 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit.
Mhm.
And so like I get what you're saying, but I'm also like, okay, what if you just ran a little hot? Like what if you just ran a little hot one night or something? Like that seems like such a nuanced, and especially if the Aura Ring like glitches or something, I don't know, it feels a little risky to me.
I know the Aura Ring thing feels risky to me too. I looked into doing this at one point in my life and didn't. So that's the only reason I know this. But if you actually just go with Natural Cycles, they have an FDA approved temperature check stick that you insert.
Oh, okay.
So it's checking you from the inside, which I would trust that over the Aura Ring.
Yeah.
But the thing is with that, you have to do it at the exact same time every day.
So much maintenance.
And you have to do it the first thing in the morning too.
Wow,
So like,
okay.
as soon as you wake up, you have to wake up at the same time, take your temperature. So that's why the Aura Ring, I think, might even at the end of the day be more effective because it's taking it at night for you
Hmm.
and you don't have to check. So it's
Hmm.
like actually at the same time every day. Because, of course, like the thing that you see consistently with these efficacy things of the cycle tracking method is obviously it depends on how compliant you are with the methodology. And since it's so
Yeah,
finicky, it's almost impossible to be
right.
like 100% compliant.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, people say that about hormonal birth control, but actually, you don't have to take it the exact same time every day. So it's
Right.
way more forgiving. Yeah, you have a 3 hour window. It depends on the type of pill. Some have even longer windows, but it's fine. And you can actually miss a whole day and then you can take 2 pills or whatever and still be protected. So
Totally.
yeah, dang.
Just with cycle tracking, it's really easy to fuck up.
Yeah, no, that seems way harder. Yeah. Even as a person who I'm like, I could do something once a day. Like I already do it with hormonal birth control. Like it's a whole other thing to be like taking a pill versus measuring the internal temperature of my vagina.
Yeah, inserting first thing in the morning, like, oh, good morning.
Yeah. I feel like that would make my libido go down.
I know, I would feel like a specimen. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
this was fun. I feel like I learned so much doing this.
Yeah. Wait, I'm curious. Last thing, like, so tell me about this copper thing. Like, what is the science behind that?
The copper IUD, it's just like toxic to sperm, basically. It kills the sperm.
Okay.
You're still ovulating. Like it's not changing your hormones at all. It does change your uterine lining. So there was some concern that after Roe v. Wade, the copper IUD would become illegal because you actually do conceive and
Oh.
you don't actually miscarry because it never implants, but it prevents
Yeah.
implantation. So like the sperm and the egg can meet, it'll just never
Yeah.
implant and
So
you'll
it can be
flush.
fertilized. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's how that works. I love it. I love knowing that all my hormones are mine and my wild, insane thought processes are actually just me going through my cycle and not like hormones making me crazy. It's so freeing to me. I love it so much.
Does the info about the like follicular and luteal cycle resonate with you in your monthly experience? Like, do you feel like you feel these changes in your mood or energy or activity?
I wish I could say yes, but like frankly, I'm just so chaotic and all over the place all the time. I can't nail it down to being like this week out of the month. It's like I don't know. I feel differently every fucking day. So I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
in
so
tune with
funny.
myself to know.
I was so sad when I found out this did not apply to me because I was like, this was a great excuse for my behavior. It's like great to be like, I'm just cranky because of my period. And, that alone might be a reason why I get off birth control, just so I can actually experience it and have it.
Yeah. Well, you should join me in the copper world.
No, 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 girl. I'm not getting an IUD. That sounds so painful. Like, I cannot do that. I can't
You'll
do
be
that shit.
fine.
Well, it lasts for so long too. I'm like, I don't know if I want my birth control to last so long. Like, I'm already 31, you know? If I'm gonna have a kid, it'll be soon. I wouldn't want to have to like get it in and then take it out. Birth control, you just like stop and you're back the next month.
Maybe get on natural cycles.
No, 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 no. That's like too much. This is fascinating. Thanks to our listener who encouraged us to do this episode. I learned so much. It's crazy how
Yeah,
you can live and be 31 years old and have experienced your cycle your whole life and not know so much information.
I know. We should really just have like a feminine sex ed class instead of having it with the men. We just need to have like a completely separate one where they're like, this is what's going on with you. Girls, ask questions. We're going to teach you.
I feel like nowadays there must be like a technological solution where there's like some sort of really good, medically vetted, standardized curriculum that you can access online. Because I feel like it's just so variable depending on your teacher and your school and like
Yeah.
now depending on what state you live in too,
Sorry, I'm laughing in my head thinking about there being like a birds and the bees app. Like all the parents just give their kids.
I think that would have been nicer, less awkward than having your parent explain the birds and the bees to you.
Yeah.
Imagine in the future it'll be like you could even choose like an avatar, like character AI. Like you could choose like Harry Potter to explain the birds and the bees to you.
Honey, have you done your sex ed app today? Go grab your iPad. Come on. All right. Well, thanks everyone. We will see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoy the pod, we would love for you to give us a follow and rate us on Apple Podcasts, which helps us get the word out and reach new listeners. Our sources are available on Patreon, where if you choose to become a patron, you'll also get access to bonus content, our monthly book club, and our eternal gratitude.
If you'd like to get in touch or suggest a topic for a future episode, email us at everythingiknowabouttpod@gmail.com or DM us across all socials at EikaPod, that's EIKA pod. Thanks for listening and see you next week.